Welcome to Chapter 13, Access Control Assurance. Information assurance is a way of assessing the usefulness and effectiveness of information security systems. In this chapter, we'll explore the major concepts behind information assurance and how those concepts can be applied to access control, resulting in more secure IT structure. Topics covered: major components of information assurance, how information assurance can be applied to access control systems, the goal of access control system monitoring and reporting, what checks and balances can be implemented to help ensure integrity, confidentiality, and availability of the control systems, how to manage and parse audit trails and audit logs, reporting issues and concerns surrounding audit trails and audit logs, how security information event managers work with access control systems, how to apply best practices is what we're going to be looking at in this chapter. So let's start with what is information assurance. Information assurance, or AI, is the practice of managing IT risks related to the storage, transportation, creation, hiding, handling of information. The concept of IA originated in the U.S. government, specifically the military and intelligence infrastructure. Information assurance and information security share common goals in confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Unlike information security, information assurance is also concerned with some bigger picture items, including privacy, compliance, governance, and strategic risk management. Information assurance is all about risk assessment and mitigation. We can never make anything 100% secure. We could, but at a cost of what? It's not worth our data. So we have to have that balance. In the past, we're going to look at confidentiality. We're going to look at the CIA triad, which is one way we can kind of help identify our risks. Instead of just saying we're going to do this, we want to make sure the CIA triad is one of the oldest models that I've used. It balances confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We can have the greatest, we can lock up all the data we want, but if it's not available, what good is it to our employees? Or if we don't keep it confidential, then again, it's useless. Or how do we know that the integrity is good? If we're not sure of that, then again, it becomes useless data. So understanding, we build this little triangle, and we have to balance all of these things as we look at it. So what is confidentiality? The property of information is not disclosed to the systems. In other words, information must be viewed, used, and copied only by the individuals that require it. So not everyone has access to it, and that's what we want to keep in mind. Integrity is about the data. If the data is not secure, if we question the data, well, then that becomes useless data to us. And then again, availability. If the people can't use it when they need it, what good is it? So we have to make sure we balance that. Then we have the 5 pillars, which is very similar to the CIA. It has those 3 tendencies, but 2 others are added to make sure it's a little bit and that is the authentication and non-repudiation of the 2-factor that we add to it. Then we have the McCumber cube, which are goals, information, and steps. And again, it's the transmission, storage, processing, technical data, availability, the human factor. So this information allows us to have everything that we want. So let's look at the authentication in that 5 pillars. We have to make sure that we have verifying the identity of the person. So it's not just saying, yep, someone logged in, they can have access. Are they who they say they are? A non-repudiation is assurance that the sender and the information provided with proof of delivery and receipt that we have this. So a good example of non-repudiation, we can see in a bank wire transfer, when the wire transfer is sent, the sender verifies its credentials with the federal bank, its third party, and then the Federal Reserve will move the money. So another thing we're going to look at, another possible, is the Parkin hexad. And again, if you look at it, we have availability, authentication, We've added integrity, confidentiality, and we've added possession or control and utility. So again, if you notice, it just keeps building on it, but it all starts with the basic triad. Possession and control relates to confidentiality, is the concept that the control of the information can be breached without confidentiality breach. For example, suppose a flash drive containing a mass copy of sensitive data is lost. The possession of those files data is breached, but until they are accessed, they are still confidential. Authentication, then it said, appropriateness of labeling information. We have the utility. Utility describes the usefulness of the data. Information that is stored in obsolete format that no longer can be read would be breached. Encryption of this. So as you see, it all spends off the triad, but we can continue to add different layers of what we want to do. So how can information assurance be applied? As we've seen in the descriptions, access control is essential to IA. IA should be applied to the organizations as we look for it. Information assurance models are the guidelines to use when they're building this information. When designing any access control, you first should determine that. Enforce confidentiality. One of the primary functions of any access control system is to allow or deny access to resources of data. However, denying access to unauthorized users is good, but we have to maintain that without the authorization that we have it, but the users who need it should have access. Access control enforce integrity. Access control prevents the loss of data integrity by preventing unauthorized users from modifying data objects either accidentally or intentionally. Enforce availability. By enforcing confidentiality and integrity, access control ensures availability. So this is what we want. If we control the other two, we have it available. And the last one, simply implement technology controls is not sufficient to ensure information assurance. Manager, staff, systems administrators and stuff, we need to make sure we have that. What are the goals of controlling and reporting? Monitoring and reporting. Well, having access to control systems is not enough. To secure sensitive information and resources, those access control systems must be continuously monitored to ensure they are working properly and no unauthorized users has been granted access. So, accuracy. To be useful, a monitoring system must have a high level of accuracy. Authorized users must be granted reliability and unauthorized users must be denied. Unfortunately, no system is 100% accurate. We can have false positives and false negatives. Variety. A monitoring system must be able to detect many types of information. Timeliness. A system must be reported suspicious immediately. Ease of use. It should be nice and easy to use. We should have intrusion detection, hardware and software solutions that monitor network traffic, looking for signs of security breaches. Anomaly detection. Anomaly detection operates on a two core principle: what is known good and what is unusually is bad. Therefore, any activity that is unknown must be reported as suspicious. Early anomaly detections were based on statistical protocols. So it's pretty simple. If this person has been working for the company for 5 years, and they're always logging in between 9 in the morning and 6 at night, and then all of a sudden they log in at 2 in the morning. That's something that's not normal, and by using this type of system, we can detect that. What checks and balances can be implemented? Many access control breaches originate internally. To guard against this risk risk of external data attack, systems and checks and balances. Track and monitor events, types, audit logs. Each type of audit log records a specific event on the system, tracking the events recording. In this system level event, the focus on users login attempts. If you get that, if you don't put it in the right number of times, you get locked out. Application level events, given the application including errors, and user level events. These are different areas that we need to examine. track and monitor user type logs. User audit logs store information on the authentication attempt, resources used, commands and applications run, and securities violations committed by users. Most importantly, this type of log provides accountability because of the ties. Unauthorized access attempt logs. Unauthorized access attempts are usually key signal that attack may be in progress. A single failed access attempt, likely just typing error or part, but if 10 failed access attempts, signals an attempt password picture should come up and be detected. Audit trails, audit log management and parsing. Log file management, a system of storing and rotating log files. The data recorded and stored in a log file may be necessary legal evidence when the time comes. We're going to make sure we have that. Log parsing. Parsing is the process of translating the reformatted raw files into useful reports. In the middle of the attack, systems administrators do not have time to go through raw files. Audit trail is a series of events gleaning from parsing log files over a period of time. Audit trail and reporting issues. Time, digging through, once we have the audit log, we have to get through them. Well, time, digging through the trails, looking for signs of malicious activities may be tedious and time-consuming. Automating the process makes it much faster. Normalization is a process of translating log files from various systems into common formats. Prioritization is the process of determining which log files are going to be looked at. Security information event is a software solution that attempts to solve several of these issues discussed in the previous section. It is designated to centralized storage and normalizing log files from the wide variety of applications and devices. Best practices for ongoingness. Whether access control systems assurance is done for regulatory compliance or simply because it's a good business practice. Follow a divine model. The CIA triad, the 5 pillars, of IA, Parkin Hexad are well-known and tested models. There's no need to start from scratch, which there's so many out there. Use of access controls to enforce IA. Regardless of which model you use, your organization should choose and develop access control systems that will enforce the key tenets of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Implement an IDS, an intrusion detection system, is a key tool for recognizing and stopping attack in progress. Make audit trails analysis a priority. Log files and audit trails that are rarely analyzed are the digital equivalent of a paperweight. They are limited use, take up a lot of space, and without looking at them, why even collect the data? Implement an ongoing training system. This ensures that all your personnel, not just security engineers, are aware of information assurance concepts and know how to recognize potential importance in their attacks. Chapter summary. Information assurance is the guideline for planning, implementing, and assessing a security IT infrastructure. This chapter examines several models, including the CIA triad, 5 pillars, and Parkinson Hexad. An organization should choose one of the most accurate reflects the IA requirement. Ideally, every component of infrastructure should be evaluated for its contribution to information assurance on critical resources. Staff members, both technical and non-technical, should participate in regular training on information assurance concepts so they are aware that the security implications and their decisions are not able to recognize important anomalies when they occur. When security incidents do occur, carefully analyze and cross-reference various audit logs provides key information about the incident. This information is a valuable resource for preventing similar breaches in the future. So as we looked at There are standards out there that we should be using, and we just need to pick which one closely meets our company goals, visions, and security policies. This allows us to have the best thing that we can to prevent that. Thank you. Welcome to Chapter 14, Access Control, Laws, Policies, and Standards. While many organizations adopt access controls to achieve business objectives, these mechanisms are also adopted for many other reasons. This chapter examines the laws and regulations governing information security and the ways that complying with these regulations drives to the use of access control. This chapter also discusses how organizations use policies, standards, procedures, and guidelines to achieve control objectives. Security breaches can have a serious implication ranging from loss of profit to fines and prison time. The goal of this chapter is to highlight the important role of access control in the larger scheme of business, governmental regulations, and operations of critical infrastructure. Topics covered: U.S. compliance laws and regulations concerning IT, access control, security policies, best practices, where access control fits into the overall IT structure, examples of access control, standards, procedures, and guidelines. U.S. compliance laws and regulations. Today, corporations are required to be compliant with various government standards, depending on the industry that they are. The healthcare industry has Hipaa. The publicly traded companies have SOX or Sarbanes-Oxley. They require that we follow these laws that protect both the consumer, the business, the employees of the organization. Another benefit is that secure business practice can enhance customers' confidence by ensuring customers that private information is stored securely. Creating and adhering to the required laws can be difficult initially. It usually comes at a cost and time consuming to build, making sure we understand the laws. But once the systems are in place, it is relatively easy to follow. In IT, it's imperative that you keep up to date with your regulations compliance. Understanding what regulations affect your business are vital to success. Different industries deal with different types of areas. The Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, otherwise known as the Financial Modernization of 1999, primarily aimed at the financial services industry. This not only covers banking, but also insurance, securities, brokers, lenders, real estate, settlement, tax. The Act takes compliance and other security outside of the IT only world in the realm of the entire company, requiring every department to be responsible for securing the consumer privacy. Information technology is a major component, but overall the implementation is not the soul of IT. Some of the basic requirements: develop, implement, and maintain a comprehensive written information security that contains administrative, technical, and safeguards that are appropriate to the size and complexity. Companies are required to continuous risk management, that you must identify potential risks, contains provisions to protect non-public personal information and financial institutions. Companies' privacy note must be on their webpage, and they're obligated to select and retain services that are capable of maintaining appropriate safeguard. One of the major components is that the security program in place that limits access and protects consumer financial data. In terms of access control, the organization should define who can access data and for how long. Any access to sensitive data must be logged. Data security goes beyond storage and encompasses all aspects of the organization. The Hipaa Health Insurance Portability and Accounting Act. This is started in 1996 and has two main parts. Part 1 protects the health insurance coverage for workers and their families if they change or lose job. Title 2, as an administrative simplification, requires the establishment of national standards for electronic healthcare transactions and national identifiers for providers, health insurance plans, and employees. It also addresses security and privacy. So we're going to look at these different rules. The privacy rules, transaction and code set of rules, unique identifier, security rules, and enforcement. The privacy rule took effect in 2003. It regulates the use of disclosure of protecting information held coverage in titles. It establishes regulations for the use of disclosures protecting healthcare information, which any information that is concerned health status, health care, or any payment for health care that linked to the individual. So what does that mean? The individual within 30 days of request, when its covered entity has obtained the written permission of the individual when the law is implemented. Transactions and code set rule. The transaction code set requires a common standard for the transfer of health information between healthcare providers and organizations that payment for these services. Unique identifier standard rules. A unique identifier is created for providers' health plans. The employer identifier, which is based on the IRS employee's identification number, patient identifier, which is a standard unique way of identifying patients, the national provider identifier, which was originally developed for the Medicare system, and the health plan provider, which is a 9-digit developed. Security rule. The security rule is a compliant to the privacy rule, complement to the privacy rule. Security rule deals with electronic protected health information. It lays out 3 layers of security safeguards that must be used. Adopt a written set of policies and procedures, reference policies and procedures to make sure they're good, identify employees and groups, restrict access, and so on. We also have the physical safeguards. Put controls in place that govern the additional removal of software and hardware to the environment. Carefully control and monitor access to equipment containing that. Limit access to the equipment and software information. Enforcement rule. The Hipaa enforcement was created in February 2006 by the Department of Health and Human Resources. It is the final rule that details the bias and procedures for imposing civil, monetary penalties in governor entities. The rules resolves compliance issues in an informal manner before restoring to monetary penalties. The Sarbanes-Oxley, or known as SOX, of 2002 was created to protect investors by improving the accuracy and reliability of financial disclosures of publicly traded companies. SOX accomplishes this through strengthening existing penalties, making corporate officers personally responsible for the disclosures, and imposes harsher punishment, larger fines, and prison sentences for any individual who knowingly alters or destroys the information that is intended or to obstruct investigations. So there's 11 titles that make up the SOX Act. The Publicly Accounting Oversight Board provides independent oversight of publicly accounting. Auditors' independence established standards that require external auditors to be completely independent of the firm. Corporate responsibility mandates that executives must take individually personal responsibility for the accuracy of compliance. Enhanced financial disclosures describes enhanced reporting procedures required to financial. Commission resources defines that the condition under which the Security and Exchange Commission can pay commissions. Studies and reports define the study and controller general. Corporate and criminal fraud accountability imposes documentation retention if required. White crime penalty enforcement increases the criminal penalty associated with white crime collar. Corporate tax states that the chief executive officer should sign the company tax return, and corporate fraud accountability identifies fraud. Family Education Right and Privacy Act, FERPA, of 1974. It's the federal law that protects the privacy and ensures the accuracy of student educational records. Educational institutions are required to protect educational records by adhering to strict guidelines set in the Act. The faculty and staff must be familiar with FERPA before they may release any student's educational record. FERPA establishes students' right to know the information, location, and purpose of educational records. Educational records may appear in the following forms: written documents stored in the student's file, computer media, microfiche, microfilm, videos, videotapes, audio tapes, CDs, films, photographs, any record that pertains to personal identification. The following are exempt: private notes, law enforcement records, medical records, statistical data does not contain information, and pre-graded materials before the final grade is determined. Communication Assistance Law Enforcement of 1994 requires that telecommunications carriers and the maker of the equipment used by the telecommunicator take steps to facilitate the electronic surveillance activities of law enforcement agencies. Must cooperate with legitimate law enforcement's request to conduct electronic surveillance on an individual and provide detailed calling records of the individual under investigation. The Children's Internet Privacy Act of 2000, that addresses internet access in public schools and libraries. Any school or library use the federal E-rating program. E-rating offers discounts to libraries and schools, ensuring that they have affordable and to modern telecommunications. Access by minors is inappropriate. The safety and security of minors when using electronic communications, unauthorized access, unauthorized disclosures are some of the things that we have. And we have the FDA. Regulation deals with Food and Drug Administration, guidelines of electronic records and signatures, and that's pretty straightforward. The North America Electric Reliability Council handles regulations of energy and utility companies, created in 1968. Physical guidelines provide physical protection measures for all. Americans in the Disability Act includes provisions to ensuring that everyone has equal rights to accommodations. So some best practices for private sector enterprise organization. Access control policies are generally different for enterprise-level organizations than they are with smaller organizations. An enterprise organization may have employees across a wide geographic location, even multiple countries. These organizations have complex organization structures with several fairly autonomous divisions. Security policies for enterprise organization must take this complexity into the act, defining an authorization policy. An authorization policy is a high-level document that defines how the organization will assign and enforce access control rights. It is important to write formal authorizations. IT security policy framework. Organizations have policies and procedures in place Business units such as accounting and human resources, they also establish policies that must be followed. Policy is a document that describes specific requirements of rules that must be met. Standards is a collection of requirements that must be met by anyone who performs a given task or works in a specific system. Guidelines is a set of suggestions or best practices meeting standards and policies. Procedures is a set of specific steps to be taken to achieve desired results. Which policies are needed in access control? Acceptable use policies describes what tasks can and cannot be performed using the organization's computer equipment. Password policy describes the organization's requirement for a strong password creation. Account management policy describes new accounts to be created. And remote access defines the connecting methods that are going to be used. What standards are needed to support these? User account describes various types of users' accounts, describes IDs. And what do we need to implement these? User fills out access forms, IT receives the forms are reviewed, and then they're carried out. We should also have use for when an employee leaves, what are you going to be doing? So the summary, we looked at the several scenarios in which control mandated by law, and we looked at all the different laws, which is controlling access to the information. You learned about the best practices, standards, policies, and procedures for implementing access control. Finally, you explored several cases. So these are some of the things that we looked at. No matter what industry you're working, if there are government laws, we have to follow them, and we must follow them to the letter, or there are consequences that we need to do. So whatever company you're working for, make sure that you are following all the laws, procedures that we have in place. Thank you.